the night before signing. I sit alone in an empty parking lot, replaying the recording from 3 years ago. "You're irrelevant," his voice echoes, brittle as breaking glass. Tomorrow morning, his company will wire 8 figures and beg for licensing rights to my irrelevant technology. This isn't about money. It's about who gets to rewrite history and who's forced to read it aloud in front of the cameras. My name is Eliza Hart, and 3 years ago, I learned that being right means nothing if you're in the wrong room. The Tessaline Labs conference room smelled like burnt coffee and venture capital anxiety that Tuesday morning. 23 engineers crammed around a table designed for 12. All of us watching Grant Wexler pace in front of his PowerPoint like a televangelist selling salvation. Our Series C was 2 weeks away, and he'd called this strategic alignment session at 6 a.m. "The future isn't in the cloud," Grant declared, clicking to a slide showing network latency charts. "It's at the edge, but our edge strategy needs to be sexy, investable." I'd been up for 36 hours straight, fine-tuning my low microkernel demo. My fingers still smelled like solder flux from the prototype boards. When Madeline Shore, our CTO, started talking about pivoting to AI-native architectures, I couldn't stay quiet. "We already have edge-ready AI." I stood, pulling out the ruggedized tablet I'd been testing. Loam can run neural networks on a Raspberry Pi with no network connection. Watch this. The demo was perfect. My kernel initialized in 0.3 seconds, loaded a computer vision model, and identified 17 objects in the room in real time. No cloud, no latency, just pure, efficient edge computing. Grant stopped mid-pace. "That's nice, Eliza. But investors want transformative platforms, not embedded systems from 2015. This isn't old tech." My voice cracked slightly. "The distributed initialization sequence alone is irrelevant." Madeline cut me off, her Stanford MBA showing through her developer costume. "Eliza, you've been invaluable, but we need to be honest. Your approach doesn't align with where we're heading. Embedded systems are a commodity now." The room went silent. I saw Caleb Rourke, the lead investor from Apex Ventures, typing on his phone in the corner, not even watching. "You want to see irrelevant?" I grabbed the emergency radio from the wall mount. Every California office has one since the wildfires. This runs embedded Linux from 2008. When cell towers burn, when the cloud goes dark, this still works. "My kernel." Grant reached over and switched off my tablet mid-sentence. "Thank you, Eliza. Let's table this. Madeline will follow up about transitioning your responsibilities." Transitioning. Corporate speak for burial. I recorded the rest of the meeting on my phone, tucked against my laptop bag. 47 minutes of them dissecting my work, pulling out the pieces they liked, discarding the rest. Grant used the word irrelevant 6 more times. Madeline suggested moving me to maintenance and documentation. The recording captured everything. Their laughter when someone joked about my obsession with offline computing. Grant saying my dual-core optimization was cute but prehistoric. And the moment they assigned my Loam project to the new Stanford grad who'd been there 3 weeks. That night, I sat in the dockside apartment I could barely afford, playing the recording back. My father had spent 30 years in the Alderton coal mines, coming home covered in dust that never quite washed off. He'd told me, "Baby girl, they'll try to bury you. Make sure you know how to dig." I opened my laptop and started documenting everything, every line of code, every design decision, every timestamp. Tessaline owned my work product, but they didn't own what came next. They'd called me irrelevant in front of 23 witnesses and a venture capitalist. 3 years later, I'd make them pay market rate for that irrelevance. The patent filing appeared on my desk 2 weeks after that meeting, my name conspicuously absent from the inventor list. Tessaline had taken my Loam architecture, dressed it up with buzzwords, and filed it as Novel AI-Optimized Edge Computing Framework. Grant Wexler, lead inventor. The Stanford grad, co-inventor. My 3 years of development erased. HR scheduled my transition meeting for Friday at 4 p.m. the corporate equivalent of taking someone behind the barn. Monica from legal slid a non-compete across the table thick enough to use as a doorstop. 2 years, she said, manicured nails tapping the signature line. No work in embedded systems, edge computing, or AI infrastructure. Your severance depends on signing. This covers basically all of computer engineering. That's intentional. She didn't even pretend to smile. Tessaline is protecting its investments. I needed that severance. My bank account had $1,147, and rent was $2,300. But as I read through the agreement, something jumped out, a single paragraph buried on page 17. The non-compete covered commercial development and deployment. Research and open source contributions were exempt. They'd gotten sloppy. I signed, took my cardboard box of desk plants and coffee mugs, and drove home to find an eviction warning taped to my door. 60 days to pay or vacate. The dockside apartment had been my sanctuary, with its view of the North Oriole shipping yards. But sanctuary doesn't mean much when you can't afford it. That night, I pulled up every technical document I'd ever written at Tessaline. Not the code, that would be theft. Just my personal lab notebooks, the ones I'd filled during unpaid weekends and 2 a.m. debugging sessions. Every engineer keeps them. Most companies never think to claim them. Page after page of initialization sequences, boot optimizations, distributed processing patterns. And there, in notebook number 7, was the thing they'd missed. My distributed initialization sequence. The patent they'd filed described the overall architecture but treated initialization as a black box. Standard boot procedures. They'd stolen my house but left the foundation. I started making calls. Not for jobs, the non-compete made sure of that, but for something else. Naomi Silver, the voice answered on the third ring. You defended Marcus Chen against Intel last year. I did. Who's asking? Someone with a similar problem but a different solution. We met at a diner in Mill River, 40 miles from any tech campus. Naomi looked like she'd stepped out of a courtroom thriller, sharp suit, sharper eyes, and a smile that suggested she ate corporate lawyers for breakfast. Show me what you've got, she said. I spread out my notebooks, the patent filing, and the non-compete. She read for 20 minutes without speaking, occasionally photographing pages with her phone. They fucked up, she finally said. The initialization sequence isn't in their claims. You can't compete commercially, but you can file your own patent on the unclaimed components. Better yet, she pulled out her laptop. You can publish it academically first, establish prior art, then file. With what money? That's where I come in. Contingency basis. I get 30% of any licensing deals. 25. Deal. She signaled for more coffee. You'll need hardware support. Know anyone? I thought of Jules Whitaker, who'd quit Apple after they'd buried her power management innovations. She answered on the first ring. Eliza, heard they pushed you out, those bastards. Want to help me push back? When do we start? 3 days later, I stood in an abandoned warehouse in Mill River, watching Jules wrestle with industrial shelving while Naomi set up a folding table she'd bought at Goodwill. The space leaked when it rained and smelled like motor oil. But the landlord took cash and didn't ask questions. Welcome to Larkline Dynamics, I said, spray painting our name on a piece of plywood. Larkline? Jules asked. Larks sing at dawn, new beginnings. I set down the paint can. Plus, it sounds expensive. Naomi laughed. You're learning. So what's our first move? I pulled out a fresh notebook and wrote Bedrock across the top. We're going to build something they can't ignore, can't steal, and can't stop. And when they realize they need it, I underlined the word twice. They're going to pay us for the privilege. The eviction notice was still in my pocket. I had 43 days left. Time to dig. The warehouse in Mill River became our church, and voltage was our religion. Every morning at 5 a.m., I'd drive past the abandoned textile mills and rusted water towers, arriving to find Jules already elbow-deep in circuit boards. her workbench littered with oscilloscope traces and half-eaten protein bars. "Coffee's on," she'd say without looking up. "Found a way to shave 3 milliseconds off boot time." 3 milliseconds mattered when you were building something nobody thought you could. Bedrock started where Loam ended, but evolved into something sharper, meaner. While Tessaline's engineers were adding features to impress venture capitalists, I was stripping everything down to raw efficiency. The distributed initialization sequence became my obsession. Not just parallel processing, but something deeper. Silicon-level authentication chains that made the kernel effectively unclonable. "Watch this," I told Jules one night, running Bedrock on a salvaged drone processor. Every chip generates a unique cryptographic signature during initialization. Try to copy the kernel to different hardware. The system refused to boot. Error codes cascaded across the screen. "Holy shit," Jules whispered. "You've made hardware DRM that actually works." "Better. I've made it mandatory for secure edge computing. Anyone who wants to run AI models offline without risking model theft will need this." Naomi arrived with takeout and legal precedents. "Filed the provisional patent today. Prior art publication goes live tomorrow on Archive. But we need money, real money, or this dies in 6 months." I looked at our bank account. $2,100, mostly from Jules selling her motorcycle. My eviction was in 2 weeks. "There's a city grant," I said. "Ridge Lake County, $50,000 for public safety innovations. That's nothing in tech terms. It's everything if we win it." We worked 18-hour days. Jules handled hardware optimization while I refined the kernel. Naomi pitched in, learning enough coding to write documentation. The warehouse grew colder as autumn hit. We couldn't afford heating, so we worked in fingerless gloves, our breath visible in the morning air. The grant application demanded a practical demonstration. We chose wildfire detection, California's perpetual nightmare. Using Bedrock, we built a mesh network of cheap sensors that could identify smoke patterns and predict fire spread without any internet connection. Total hardware cost, $500. Tessaline's transformative platform would have cost 50 times that and died the moment cell towers burned. "We need a mission statement," Naomi said, reviewing the application. I thought about Grant's words, about Madeline's dismissal, about every meeting where men in blazers decided what mattered. Equal access to secure edge computing, RAN-Z licensing, reasonable and non-discriminatory. Zero cost for research, capped fees for commercial use. That's leaving money on the table. "No," I said, remembering my father's cold, dusty hands. "That's building a foundation. They can't claim we're patent trolls if we're literally giving it away to researchers and first responders." The grant committee meeting was held in a community center that smelled like basketball rubber and floor wax. 5 city councilors, 3 fire chiefs, and the county emergency coordinator. No venture capitalists, no Stanford MBAs. Just people who needed things to work when everything else failed. I ran the demo live. Smoke detection in 12 seconds. Fire spread prediction in 20. Full mesh network self-healing when I physically destroyed one node with a hammer. That got their attention. "How much would this cost to deploy county-wide?" Fire Chief Reynolds asked. $40,000, including training. Tessaline quoted us $2 million for something similar. "Their system needs cloud connectivity," I said. "When the campfire hit paradise, cell towers melted. The cloud doesn't help when the sky is burning." We won the grant. That night, the 3 of us sat in the warehouse, slightly drunk on cheap champagne, when my phone buzzed. A Google alert for Bedrock plus kernel plus edge computing. Someone had noticed our archive paper, then another alert, and another. By morning, we had 17 emails from developers wanting to experiment with Bedrock, 3 universities requesting research licenses, and one message that made my blood freeze. "Interesting work. We should talk. Caleb Rourke, Apex Ventures." The same investor who'd ignored my demo at Tessaline. "He can fuck right off," Jules said. "No," I said, "an idea forming. Let him come. Let them all come. But this time, I looked at our plywood sign, at our freezing warehouse, at my two partners who'd believed when no one else would. This time, they play by our rules. Naomi grinned. What happened to that nice girl from Alderton? She learned to dig. The ONS Edge Standards Committee met in a Marriott conference room that reeked of corporate desperation and complimentary mints. I'd driven 14 hours to Denver because flying would have maxed out my last credit card. Jules had sewn a Larkline Dynamics logo onto a thrift store blazer. Professional theater. Proposal 7.3, the committee chair announced. Distributed Initialization Framework for Secure Edge Computing, submitted by Larkline Dynamics. 43 engineers from Intel, Qualcomm, ARM, and yes, Tessalin turned to stare. Grant wasn't there, but Madeline Shore sat third row center, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and rage in 3 seconds flat. You have 20 minutes, the chair said. I didn't need 20, I needed 7. The demo ran flawlessly, Bedrock initializing across heterogeneous hardware, creating unforgeable silicon fingerprints, enabling zero-trust edge computing. But the kill shot was the test suite. I'd published it open source the night before, with a simple challenge. Any kernel claiming edge AI capability should pass these benchmarks. The test suite is already available on GitHub, I announced. 17 universities have adopted it. The European Commission is considering it for regulatory compliance. The question isn't whether Bedrock becomes the standard, it's whether this committee wants to be part of defining it. Madeline stood. This is clearly derivative of Tessalin's existing patents. Which patents? Naomi interrupted from the back, legal folders in hand. The ones that cite zero prior art on distributed initialization, or the ones filed after Ms. Hart's provisional patents? The room went silent. After the vote, 27-4, 8, against. Tessalin abstaining, Madeline cornered me by the elevator. You vindictive little. Careful, I said. Your lawyers won't like actionable threats. This won't stand. We'll challenge every... With what? The code you don't have? The initialization sequence you never understood? I pressed the elevator button. You called me irrelevant, Madeline. Now I'm a required dependency. Back in Mill River, Jules had transformed our warehouse into something resembling an actual office. Salvaged whiteboards covered in architecture diagrams, a coffee maker that only worked if you hit it twice, and a banner reading Rust and Rivets Hackathon, October 15th, verse 17. Hackathon, I asked. Community building. Jules explained. Naomi's idea. Get developers using Bedrock before the big players can create alternatives. Naomi nodded. Plus, Santiago Ruiz from TechCrunch wants to cover it. Small startup challenges, big tech narrative. He's eating it up. We expected 30 developers. We got 300. They came from everywhere. UC Berkeley kids, Boeing engineers, a team from the Ridge Lake Fire Department who'd been running our beta. Someone had driven from Saskatchewan with a pickup truck full of Raspberry Pis. The warehouse became a symphony of keyboard clicks, solder smoke, and energy drink cans. Check this out, a developer showed me Sunday morning. Agricultural drone swarm running Bedrock, 30-mile range, no connectivity needed. Crop analysis for farms with no internet. Another team had built emergency mesh networks for Puerto Rico. Another, prosthetic limbs that processed neural signals locally. Each project proved what I'd known all along. Edge computing wasn't about being sexy for VCs. It was about solving real problems when perfect conditions didn't exist. Santiago Ruiz interviewed me between demos, his recorder catching the chaos. Why open test suites? Why not monetize immediately? Because standards aren't built in boardrooms, I said, watching a high school robotics team debug their code. They're built when developers trust your technology enough to depend on it. Tessalin creates products. We're creating infrastructure. And if they just copy your approach, let them try. Every implementation that passes our test suite validates our patents. Every failure proves they need our expertise. He paused. This feels personal. I thought about the eviction notice I'd framed above my desk, the recording of Grant's dismissal, the nights eating ramen while coding until my eyes burned. It's not personal. I lied. It's strategic. Monday morning brought emails, Ford wanting to discuss autonomous vehicle applications, the Department of Defense interested in secure battlefield computing, and buried among them, a message that made Jules whoop. Kronos Forge downloaded our test suite 17 times last week, different IP addresses, but all from their Sunnyvale office. They're trying to reverse engineer Bedrock, Naomi said. No, I corrected, pulling up our server logs. They're trying to make their kernel pass our tests. And failing? I opened a new document and started typing, Public Notice. The Bedrock Certification Program launches November 1st. Any kernel claiming compliance with ONS Edge standards must pass public verification. Results will be published in real time. That's a declaration of war, Jules said. No. I smiled, remembering my father's words about digging. That's a bear trap, and they're about to step right in it. The smoking gun arrived in a FedEx package with no return address. A Kronos Forge development board running their new Prometheus kernel. The whistleblower's note was brief. Check the init sequence. They think they're clever. Jules hooked it to our diagnostic rig at 2 a.m., coffee number 6 burning her stomach. I watched the boot sequence scroll past, familiar patterns jumping out like neon signs. There, I pointed. Initialization order, memory allocation pattern, even the error codes. They changed the variable names. Jules laughed bitterly. That's it. Like copying homework and changing X to Y. But the real discovery came when we dumped the binary. Hidden in the compiled code were comment artifacts, fragments of text that should have been stripped, but weren't. One line made my hands shake. To do, verify against Bedrock Test Suite v2. They're not even trying to hide it, Naomi said when we called her. They're betting we can't prove damages without revealing our source code. We don't need source code, I said. We have something better. The Bedrock Verification Suite v2 launched that afternoon. New feature. Any kernel attempting certification would generate a detailed initialization fingerprint, timestamps, memory patterns, instruction sequences, invisible to end users but undeniable in court. Within hours, forums lit up, developers comparing fingerprints, noticing coincidences between Prometheus and Bedrock patterns. We didn't accuse anyone. We just provided tools and let the community draw conclusions. Tesseline's response came via certified mail, cease and desist, claiming we were creating market confusion and unfairly targeting competing technologies. Reply? Naomi asked. Publicly, I said. We posted their letter online with our response. Larkline Dynamics welcomes all technologies to prove their independence and innovation through objective testing. If similarities exist between implementations, we trust developers to reach their own conclusions. The pressure was working. Emails leaked from Kronos Forge showed panic. Their enterprise customers were asking uncomfortable questions. But Tesseline doubled down, announcing their revolutionary Edge AI platform at a press event, built on what they called proprietary initialization technology. Grant Wexler himself gave the demo. I watched the live stream from our warehouse, noting every Bedrock pattern he unknowingly showcased. Arrogant prick, Jules muttered. No, I said. Desperate, look at his hands. Grant's fingers trembled slightly. He knew. They all knew. They'd built their house on stolen foundations and were praying nobody checked the basement. Then Caleb Rourke made his move. Impressive progress, he said, appearing in our warehouse on a Thursday afternoon like he owned the place. Apex Ventures wants to offer you a way out of this mess. We're not in a mess, I said. Aren't you? Tesseline has resources to fight this for years. Kronos Forge has government contracts that make them untouchable. You have this. He gestured at our admittedly shabby headquarters. 20 million. We buy Larkline. Integrate your technology properly. Everyone wins. Properly meaning buried. Properly meaning profitable. You'd run the Edge Computing Division, full autonomy. Under Grant Wexler? His silence was answer enough. Get out, I said. This is your only. Out. After he left, we sat in silence. 20 million would solve everything. Jules could start her own lab. Naomi could take real cases. I could stop eating ramen, stop fighting, stop. We're not taking it, Jules said. Obviously not, Naomi agreed. But we need money. I admitted. Real money. The grant's almost gone. That's when Chief Reynolds called. Ridge Lake Fire Department wants to purchase 100 bedrock units, full deployment, and we're recommending it to the state fire marshal. We don't have 100 units. Then you better start building. Purchase orders for $400,000, net 30. I hung up and looked at my partners. We need assembly space, real equipment, and a contract manufacturer. Jules finished. I know someone. Small shop in Fremont. They do defense work but have capacity. Can we trust them? The owner's daughter was in my Apple team. They screwed her over too. We drove to Fremont that night, showed them our specs, our fire department contract, our certification suite. The owner, Mr. Park, read everything twice. Tessalin tried to buy us last year, he said finally. Lowballed, insulted my engineers, said we were just assembly monkeys. He smiled. When do we start? By November, we were shipping units. Small batches, fire departments, agricultural companies, research universities. Each sale validated our patents, established market presence, proved damages, and every single unit generated a bedrock fingerprint. They're going to have to respond, Naomi said. Tracking Kronos Forge's downloads of our newest test suite, their investors are asking why they can't pass certification. Let them come, I said, watching our bank account finally show 5 figures. We're not hiding in a warehouse anymore. But we kept the warehouse, painted the walls, fixed the leak, because every morning I looked at that eviction notice above my desk and remembered they tried to bury me. They forgot I knew how to dig. The North Star Expo consumed the Moscone Center like a Silicon fever dream. 10,000 badges, 500 exhibitors, and every major tech journalist hunting for the next big thing. Tessalin had bought the premium corner booth, 3 stories of curved OLED screens and industrial design porn. Kronos Forge went military chic, complete with camouflage netting and tactical gear displays. We had a folding table and a secret. You sure about this? Jules asked, tucking the handheld validator into her jacket pocket. The device was no bigger than a phone, custom-built over 3 sleepless nights. They're about to demo revolutionary drone swarms, I said, watching Tessalin's crew prep their flight cage, running their amazing proprietary edge computing. Time to test that claim. Santiago Ruiz found us first, recorder already running. Heard you're planning something. Just observing the competition, I said. You should watch the Kronos Forge demo at 2. Might be educational. The Tessalin presentation started at noon. Grant himself took the stage, his confidence restored by what he thought was a safe venue. Their drones lifted off in perfect synchronization, running complex formation patterns while processing obstacle avoidance locally. No cloud connectivity, Grant announced. Pure edge intelligence, developed entirely in-house by our world-class engineering team. I felt Jules tense beside me. Those flight patterns were running on our architecture, our initialization sequence, our work. But rushing the stage would just make us look desperate. We waited. Kronos Forge's demo pulled the bigger crowd. Military contracts attracted congressional staffers, and their CEO, Marcus Volker, knew how to work a room. Their rescue drones launched into a search and rescue simulation, thermal imaging and casualty detection running in real time. Completely autonomous operation, Volker declared. Even in zero connectivity environments, this is American innovation at its finest. That's when I stood up. Mind if we verify that? I called out, loud enough for the gathered press to hear. Volker's smile flickered. I'm sorry. Who are you? Eliza Hart, Larkline Dynamics. We developed the verification suite your kernel supposedly passes. I walked toward the demonstration area, Jules flanking me. Surely you won't mind a live validation, for transparency? The crowd sensed blood. Phones came out, cameras turned. This is highly irregular. Volker started. It's a 10-second test, I said, pulling out our validator. Unless there's something you're hiding. He couldn't refuse, not with 50 journalists watching. His technicians looked panicked, but Volker nodded stiffly. I held the validator near their control station. The device connected to the drone's diagnostic port, a standard interface they couldn't disable without crippling field support. The screen lit up immediately. Bedrock initialization. Signature detected. Match 97. 3% patent. US 2024 7839291. Larkline Dynamics. Status: unlicensed implementation. The crowd pushed forward. Santiago's photographer was already shooting. Someone from The Verge live-streamed the screen to Twitter. There must be a mistake. Volker stammered. Should we check Tesseline's drones too? Jules asked innocently, already walking toward their booth. Grant Wexler appeared as if summoned, his face pale. This is industrial sabotage. Security. But Moscone Security wasn't about to intervene in what looked like a legal dispute with cameras rolling. We reached Tesseline's demo station. Same test, same result. Match: 94.7%. Status: unlicensed implementation. You're using our technology, I announced, my voice carrying across the now silent exhibition floor. Both of you. Without attribution, without licensing, without permission. These are false positives, Grant said desperately. Your legal team should check the blockchain timestamps. Naomi interrupted, appearing with a folder of printed documents. Every Bedrock initialization generates a cryptographic proof. We've been logging them since August. Your proprietary kernel has been phoning home to our servers every time it boots. Madeline Shore pushed through the crowd. Eliza, let's discuss this privately. Like we discussed my irrelevance privately. I turned to face the cameras. 3 years ago, Tesseline called my work obsolete, pushed me out, buried my contributions. Now they're running their entire edge platform on technology they stole from me. The beautiful part was we didn't need to prove code theft. The initialization signatures were like fingerprints at a crime scene. Unique, undeniable, and automatically generated every time their systems booted. Grant made one last attempt. This is a misunderstanding. Similar technologies can produce similar. I pulled out my phone and played the recording. His voice filled the exhibition space. Eliza, you've been invaluable, but we need to be honest. Your approach doesn't align with where we're heading. Then I played the second recording, from today's demo. Pure edge intelligence, developed entirely in-house. In-house, I repeated. Interesting definition. By the time security finally arrived to escort Grant and Volker to an emergency meeting with their lawyers. Not to remove us. Every tech outlet had the story. The validator videos went viral within an hour. Bedrock was trending, but the killing blow came from an unexpected source. Caleb Rourke tweeted, Apex Ventures is reviewing all investments in companies that may have violated IP rights. Due diligence matters. Tesseline's stock price dropped 12% in after-hours trading. That night, in our hotel room overlooking the bay, Naomi's phone rang constantly. Lawyers, journalists, potential customers who suddenly trusted us more than the big players. They'll settle, she said. They have to. Every boot of their system creates more evidence. Jules was running numbers on her laptop. Based on their deployed units, they owe us approximately. It's not about the money, I interrupted, looking out at the city lights. It never was. Then what? Jules asked. I thought about that morning 3 years ago, about being called irrelevant, about almost losing everything. It's about making them say it, publicly, that they need us, that they were wrong, that Eliza Hart's work matters. My phone buzzed. Grant Wexler. We should talk. Tomorrow. My lawyers will reach out. I deleted it without responding. They could wait. For once, they could be the ones sitting in an empty parking lot, wondering if everything they'd built was about to collapse. The revolution wasn't being televised. It was being validated, one boot signature at a time. The federal courthouse in Dunmar District stood like a granite middle finger against the sky. Naomi had filed our complaint at 8 a.m. Monday, seeking injunctive relief and damages. By noon, Tesseline's legal army had papered us with motions to dismiss, claims of harassment, and a countersuit for defamation. They're trying to bury us in legal fees, Naomi said, spreading documents across the conference table we'd rented by the hour. Classic big law intimidation. Let them, I said. We've got something better than lawyers. The International Trade Commission investigation request went live that afternoon. Not a lawsuit, a regulatory action. If the ITC found violation, they could block every Tesseline and Kronos Forge product at the border. No imports, no exports. Corporate death by paperwork. Within 48 hours, their distribution partners started calling. Best Buy wanted clarification on liability. Amazon suspended listings pending investigation. The Defense Department put Kronos Forge contracts under review. Grant's second attempt at contact came through Madeline. This is destroying value for everyone. Be reasonable. Reasonable, like when they'd reasonably destroyed my career. Santiago Ruiz's feature story dropped Thursday morning. The engineer they called irrelevant. How Eliza Hart built the technology Silicon Valley stole. He'd done his homework, interviewed former Tesseline employees who'd witnessed my dismissal, pulled patent filings showing the timeline, even found the Stanford grad who'd admitted in a bar that he'd been handed my work. But the centerpiece was the audio recording. Grant's voice, dismissive and cruel. Contrasted with footage from North Star where he'd desperately claimed innovation. The internet did what it does best, turned him into a meme. Irrelevant became tech Twitter's favorite punchline. Tesseline's stock dropped another 18%. They're ready to deal, Naomi announced Friday afternoon. Real talks, not posturing. The meeting was set for neutral ground, the Meridian Hotel in Alder City. I insisted on specific terms, no NDAs until after agreement, recorded proceedings, and Grant Wexler personally present. That's humiliation, their lead counsel argued. That's accountability. Naomi responded. Monday arrived gray and drizzling. I sat in the Meridian's parking garage for 20 minutes, engine off, listening to rain drum on the roof. 3 years ago, I'd sat in a different parking lot, unemployed and terrified. Now they were waiting for me. Jules texted, "Remember, you already won." But winning wasn't enough. I needed them to know it. The conference room smelled like leather and fierce sweat. Grant sat at the far end, looking like he'd aged 5 years in a week. Madeline flanked him, her power suit unable to hide her exhaustion. Kronos Forge sent 3 lawyers, but no executives. Cowards to the end. Let's cut through the bullshit. I said before anyone could deploy corporate pleasantries. You stole our technology. The evidence is overwhelming. Every boot generates proof. So here's what happens now. I slid our terms across the table. Naomi had wanted to start high and negotiate down. I'd insisted on starting exactly where we'd end. RAND Z commercial licensing. 2% of gross revenue for existing products, 3% for new implementations. Full attribution in all documentation. Public acknowledgement of Larkline's innovations. The percentages are acceptable, Grant's lawyer said carefully, but public acknowledgement is non-negotiable. I pulled out my phone, the recording app visible. Mr. Wexler called my work irrelevant. He can now publicly state its relevance, or we go to trial. Grant's jaw clenched. This is vindictive. This is business. I leaned forward. You taught me that. Remember? When you explained how the tech industry really works, transformation over competence, sexy over substantial. The acknowledgement could be limited. Madeline started. Full-page ad, Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch homepage takeover. Tessaline Labs acknowledges Larkline Dynamics as the creator of fundamental edge computing innovations. I smiled. Or would you prefer we list the specific patents you violated? They broke for recess 3 times. Each time, they came back with counteroffers. Each time, I said no. You're not being reasonable, Grant finally exploded. I'm being irrelevant, I shot back. Isn't that what you wanted? Hour 4. They cracked. Full licensing agreement, full attribution. The public acknowledgement would run the following week. But I had one more requirement. A foundation, I said. 5 million initial funding. Supporting open-source edge computing for rural emergency services. That wasn't in the original terms. It is now. Call it corporate social responsibility. Or call it the price of stealing from someone who grew up watching her town's fire department use 20-year-old radios because they couldn't afford upgrades. Grant signed. His hand shook slightly. Madeline signed. The Kronos Forge lawyers signed. The initial payment will transfer within 48 hours, their counsel said. I stood to leave, then stopped. Oh, one more thing. I pulled out the original recording, played it one more time. Grant's voice filled the room. Eliza, you've been invaluable, but we need to be honest. Your approach doesn't align with where we're heading. Embedded systems are a commodity now. I stopped it right before irrelevant and looked him in the eye. You were wrong about everything except one thing. I was invaluable. You just didn't know how much. The acknowledgement ran 5 days later. My father called from Alderton, said the whole mining crew had seen it, had cut it out and pinned it to the break room wall. You made them eat their words, baby girl. No, Dad, I said, looking at the 8-figure wire transfer confirmation. I made them pay for them. The glass walls of the Meridian's executive conference room reflected 3 versions of me, past, present, and the one about to rewrite history. Grant Wexler sat across the polished table, his legal team arranged like a funeral procession. Madeline Shore studied her phone, avoiding eye contact. The Kronos Forge general counsel checked his watch every 30 seconds. The signed licensing agreement, Naomi announced, sliding the final documents across the table. 64 pages of admitting you need what you called irrelevant. Grant's signature looked like it hurt. Each letter scraped across the page with the weight of his humiliation. When he finished, he pushed the document back without looking up. The initial payment, his CFO confirmed, laptop open. 8.7 million, transferring now. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the notification, the wire confirmation from Chase. Those numbers were real, immediate, irrevocable, but I wasn't done. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice recorder app, and set it on the table. Grant's eyes widened as I hit play. His voice filled the room, crystal clear despite being 3 years old. Eliza, you've been invaluable, but we need to be honest. Your approach doesn't align with where we're heading. Embedded systems are a commodity now. No one needs. I stopped it right at needs, letting the silence stretch until it screamed. Interesting, I said, my voice steady as surgical steel. No one needs embedded systems. Yet here you are, writing me an 8-figure check for embedded systems technology, signing your company's future over to the person whose work didn't align with your vision. Grant's face had gone from pale to crimson. You've made your point. Have I? I stood, walked to the window overlooking Alder City's financial district. 3 years ago, you had 23 engineers watch you humiliate me. You made sure everyone knew Eliza Hart was irrelevant, a relic, yesterday's news. I turned back to face them. So let's make sure everyone knows what happened today. You just paid yesterday's news for tomorrow's foundation. The press release goes out in an hour, Naomi added. Full attribution. Your signature on every page. The entire industry will know Tessaline and Kronos Forge are licensing Larkline technology because they couldn't innovate past what Eliza built in a leaking warehouse. Madeline finally spoke. This is cruel. No, I said, gathering my copies of the agreement. Cruel was destroying my career because I didn't fit your PowerPoint narrative. Cruel was filing patents on my work while I was eating ramen and facing eviction. I tapped the contracts. This is justice at market rate. I picked up my phone. The recording still paused. My finger hovered over play. Want to hear how it ends? The part where you called me irrelevant? Grant's hands clenched on the table. We've paid. We've signed. What more do you want? Nothing, I said, deleting the recording in front of him. I don't need it anymore. Every time your products boot, every initialization sequence, every kernel load, they all announce that Grant Wexler needs Eliza Hart's technology. That's better than any recording. The wire confirmation appeared on Naomi's phone. Funds cleared, irreversible. She nodded. I headed for the door, then stopped. Oh, Grant. That new Edge AI platform you're launching next quarter, the one your investors are betting the company on? He looked up despite himself. It won't run without Bedrock, which means it won't run without my permission. Without my updates, without my continued innovation. I smiled. Turns out irrelevant was exactly what you needed. You just had to pay 8 figures to figure it out. Jules waited in the lobby, our validation device in her hand. Want to frame it? No, I said. We've got work to do. Real work. The kind that matters when the lights go out and the cloud goes dark. We walked out into the Alder City afternoon. 3 blocks away, in another glass tower. Some other CEO was probably calling another engineer irrelevant, dismissing another innovation as unmarketable, burying another breakthrough because it didn't match their slide deck. They'd learn. The same way Grant learned, the same way they all learn. The market doesn't care about your PowerPoints. Technology doesn't respect your org chart. And the engineers you bury today are the ones you'll be writing checks to tomorrow. My phone rang. Another fire department. Another order for Bedrock units. The revolution wasn't happening in boardrooms or venture capital offices. It was happening at the edge, where things had to work, where irrelevant was the only thing that mattered. The door closed on Grant Wexler's future and opened on mine. Thank you for listening to this story of justice in the tech world. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment and let's connect. If this tale of sweet revenge resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. What would you have done in Eliza's position? Let me know in the comments.